Welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm joined by Daniel Martino. He's a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, PhD candidate, and his area of research involves things pertaining to immigrations and facts, economics, and morality of immigration. Daniel, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Marcus. Very good.
Why don't you share with our listeners and watchers a little bit about yourself and your background?
So I'm from Venezuela. I moved to the United States 10 years ago. As you know, Venezuela was destroyed by its totalitarian socialist regime. And so I came here, my family left as well. And since then, I've studied economics. I just finished my PhD in economics at Columbia. I work at the Manhattan Institute. I talk about a lot about economic policy, a lot about immigration. Why is it a very important area of government policy? Simply because it influences not how we treat people, but which people live in the country, right? And that matters a lot. And as you'll see, my main area of research is the fiscal impact of immigrants, meaning how much people who move to another place paying taxes versus receiving government benefits. And that is a very important consideration to, what's the ideal design of immigration policy.
Right. So let's talk about exactly that when we think about concepts of the common good and
Yes.
And ethics in terms of immigration policy. From a natural law perspective, nations have the juridical right to govern those who come into their borders and the kind of people that come into their borders. Beginning with that broad stroke, just talk about that, please.
Yes. So absolutely, there is no full right, unrestricted, to migrate.
Mm-hmm.
There is a right to be treated with dignity, though. So once you do come to another borders, how you're treated, that's very important. And so how nations need to decide what's in the common good to decide which type of people they want to allow. Part of that decision must be what's the impact on the public coffer, right? Because a person isn't just another person in the territory that doesn't interact with others, right? I tell people, if migration was like trade, like the movement of apples, of course we should have free trade of apples. Apples can't do anything bad to you, right? But people commit crimes, people pay taxes and receive government benefits, people vote, people interact with others in different ways, in ways in which goods do not interact. So the bar to migrate is clearly much higher than the bar to trade. And so that's how I look at it from a natural law perspective. The nations have to, depending on the nation, the situations are different, right? Like a Spanish-speaking nation will probably prefer Spanish-speaking immigrants, right, for social cohesion purposes, and an English-speaking nation and English-speaking immigrants. And then the fiscal impact question, I think, is very important because there's a lot of economic myths on immigration. How do they affect the labor market? We can talk about that. But the fiscal impact is the one economic issue of migration that very few people talk about, and that does matter.
Okay, so talk about that then, because we do have to consider it in terms of a broad stroke perspective here. There are numerous facets that contribute to the question of the fiscal impact in migration, let alone the fact that if you consider illegal migration, the creation of shadow economies that greatly impacts the natural economic status of the nation and therefore taxation differences. Just talk about all of that in general.
Yeah, so, given that the United States and most developed nations have very progressive tax and redistribution systems, if you're going to be earning below the median income of the country, that means, half of the population makes more or less than that amount, then you're going to be a net burden on the national government because you're going to receive more government benefits than you pay in taxes. You might say, how is that possible? Well, it is because if you're running a budget deficit, right? Most nations are running budget deficits. They're getting in debt. It means the average person born in that country is negative, right? And so immigrants do grow the economy, and that's a good thing, and that helps with the debt burden, but also because fertility rates are below replacement, even for immigrants, then that's not sustainable, that growth. It eventually goes to zero. And so the consequence is we have to look at immigrants. If you're going to look at an immigrant that is net beneficial for the host society, it has to be an immigrant that pays more taxes than government benefits. Interestingly, about U.S. immigration policy, The type of immigrant that, for example, the church would agree is a duty of rich nations to receive, like refugees that are truly persecuted.
Yeah. Legitimate asylum seekers.
Exactly. Or refugees resettled by the government, right? They're actually more positive for the federal budget than family legal immigrants in the United States. It would be better to have more refugees and fewer family migrants in the United States, interestingly enough. For example, there's the biggest category of immigration that is not spouses of U.S. citizens is parents of U.S. citizens. About 150,000 elderly parents of U.S. citizens come every year. Now, these are people in their 60s, overwhelmingly.
Right.
And because they're in their 60s, you know,
They're
they
not
work
gonna
here a
contribute
few
more, yeah.
years, and then they collect pensions and health care from the government. So they are huge net cost to society. So that's something that the government needs to balance, right? Because on the one hand, you have family unity, right? You certainly would love to have parents being able to visit their children, take care of their grandkids. That's part of the common good. But is it fair for the rest of society to burden the shoulder of hundreds of thousands of dollars per immigrant so that you can be united? That doesn't seem fair to me. So either, you know, part of my proposals is the United States and other developed countries should move towards an immigration system that prioritizes economic contribution and still allows for family visitation, just not on a permanent basis that burdens the welfare system.
And therein lies the issue. Because of our progressive taxation system and the way we thought about immigration policy, we've unfortunately also created a bit of a concept, especially with the illegal migration problem, a bit of a concept and a push for open borders. Can you please talk about why that's ultimately detrimental to a nation?
Yes, so a lot of people in what I call are misguidedly compassionate.
Yeah. Which
Right.
is the hallmark of progressivism.
Yes, and because they have misguided compassion, they believe that it would be good for the world if the United States just said, you know, anybody can come here.
Come one, come all, yeah.
And even for Europe, right, and other places, migration is not actually just an American problem. It's actually mostly between poor countries. I mean, go to the Dominican Republic, there's huge problems with Haiti. Go to Africa, you know, go to Latin America with Venezuelans. And so the problem with that idea is that it's based first on a false premise. That false premise is that it's the United States' fault that other people have to migrate. They think that the United States ruined foreign countries, and that's not true. If anything, the United States helped other countries. And as a consequence, if you believe that, then of course you believe the United States has the duty to welcome those people.
Right.
So that's what we need to debunk first, that false premise. The other false premise is that there are no negative consequences to welcoming people and we can just bring them in no matter the numbers. But as I find in my research, the average illegal immigrant to the United States is actually a net burden on the government, the federal government. And if we count the states, it's even worse because the states here, especially democratic controlled states, give them free housing and much more free benefits, especially Medicaid, the Medicaid program in California, New York, New Jersey. So there are negative consequences for Americans. And the truth is, the majority of the population of many countries would be better off, even without welfare, begging in the streets of the United States than in their home countries working.
Yeah.
That's not the solution to this problem. The real solution to the problem of most migration is the fixing of the origin country problem.
Yep,
Now,
exactly.
why are there 8 million plus Venezuelans who have moved out of our own country, like myself? Because Venezuela was destroyed by a socialist regime. People didn't want to leave. That's not natural for 1/3 of the population of a country to leave.
Right.
That only happens because there's something really, really wrong.
Yeah.
That actually I do think the international community has a duty to help.
Right. And to look at the socio-political structures
Yes.
that are, in this case, malfunctioning and to try to remedy them. I've been talking with Daniel Martino. He's a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and we've been talking about immigration, facts about immigration, economic policies, and the morality of it. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.